everyone, welcome to the September 16th edition of the TimeformUS Forecast. I'm David Aragona here with my usual co-host Craig Mulkowski, and changing things up a little bit on the podcast today as we head up north and talk about a track that we don't often get to handicap. That is Woodbine, as they are running one of their premier days on Saturday. It is Woodbine Mile Day, that Canadian Grade 1 event that also features two other Grade 1s for the 2-year-olds, the Summer for the 2-year-old males, and then Atalma for the 2-year-old fillies. Both of those serve as preps for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf races, respectively, for the colts and geldings and the fillies on Breeders' Cup Day. So we'll talk about some exciting 2-year-old turf runners on this card. Also in the mix are one synthetic stakes race. That is the Seaway Grade 3 event for the older fillies and mares, going 7 furlongs. And we'll close things out with an allowance race on the inner turf course at Woodbine. This sequence that we are talking about will span races 7 through 11, and it has a 20-cent minimum for this guaranteed pick 5. So allows people to spread a little bit more. And Craig, I think that's going to be helpful in these races, because I know that cards like this aren't necessarily your cup of tea with no dirt races in the sequence, but I think there are some interesting things to talk about in this pick 5.
No, I don't mind turf races at all. And I did check my passport, which I haven't used in a while. It's not expired, so I feel confident that I can go to Woodbine and do just fine. But no, as a speed figure guy, I don't mind turf races at all. As you know, we do them a little bit differently in Timeform US. And a lot of times I think I find more of an edge in turf races than I do in dirt races. Now, to be 100% upfront, I don't usually do the speed figures for Woodbine. This is pretty much strictly my assistant's track, but that's probably a good thing, because he tends to do all the synthetic tracks. We're only talking about one synthetic race, but some of these horses in the turf races are coming out of synthetic races or have a lot more form to go by in those, and he's pretty much the synthetic expert of our group, so I'm happy with his speed figures in those cases.
Yeah, that's a good point. Woodbine is one of those tracks where you see a lot of horses switching back and forth between the synthetic, the Tapeta surface, and the turf quite a bit. Some of them really do prefer one of the over the other. Some are pretty much equally talented on both. I think we'll get into that discussion a little bit later when we talk about the synthetic race, the Seaway, as well as that allowance race towards the end of the sequence. We see a lot of horses switching back and forth. Not so much in the 2-year-old races, which is where we're going to start, Craig. And let's begin the sequence with race 7. It is the Grade 1 Summer. This one for the 2-year-old males, the prep for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. This one going the 1-turn mile on Woodbine's outer turf course. And Craig, the Charlie Appleby runner looms pretty large in here. The number 1 Mysterious Night. People might remember that Charlie Appleby shipped over a few runners last year to sweep both of these races, the Summer and then Atalma. I believe Albar and Wild Beauty were the 2 winners for Appleby last year. He sends one 2-year-old over to the races this year at the Summer, and that is the number 1 Mysterious Night. Seems like he's got pretty strong credentials coming in from Europe.
He does. He comes in out of a Grade 3 win at Deauville, and Deauville, I guess you say, and did it pretty easily. And I thought it was interesting reading the Timeform comment that they pretty much told you it looked like he was going to be heading for a North American campaign after that race. And sure enough, he shows up here. He's the heavy favorite. He comes in with solid Timeform ratings. I personally tend to upgrade the ratings of Timeform for 2-year-olds when they come here. I think that's one part where our scale is maybe just a little bit off. I think maybe he's probably more like a 9,500 type horse, which would make him very strong in here. And he's certainly going to be a big part of my play on the pick 5 ticket.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make about the Timeform ratings and comparing them to the TimeformUS ratings. Timeform ratings are not speed figures. They're created with a different methodology, and I think you're right. Sometimes the numbers for the age-restricted races, like the 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds, can be a little bit depressed. You see that sometimes in the Breeders' Cup, so you can kind of make that mental adjustment when you look at a horse like Mysterious Night. But, I mean, he's earning Timeform ratings that are comparable to the TimeformUS speed figures that a lot of the horses in this field are running, so he looks pretty pretty formidable. Just from a class standpoint, I'll note that 3 back when he ran in that Group 2 July Stakes at Newmarket, the horse that won that race, Persian Force, seems like he's a pretty good one. He went on to be second in a couple of Group 1 events, the Phoenix and the Pre-Morny. So Mysterious Knight definitely is the one to beat in here, and we don't have to extol the virtues of Charlie Appleby to be runners in the United States. I mean, he just has been very dangerous with anything that he shipped over the past couple of years or so. So he's the one to beat. Craig, when I was looking beyond him, we've got a few runners coming out of the local prep for this, the Soaring Free. The winner of that race, Philip My Dear, did look pretty good. He's been impressive winning both starts, kind of coming from off the pace to get it done with these visually impressive late kicks. I'm just not sure about the overall quality of those Woodbine-based 2-year-olds.
I agree. We only have one other horse in here that's not Woodbine-based, and that's the 3-horse Appraise. I'm not impressed with the local horses in this particular race, particularly from a speed figure point of view. Philip My Dear only ran an 84, and that's about as good as we're going to get from the Woodbine contingent. So the other horse I would be more interested in would be the 3-horse Appraise from Chad Brown. I don't consider him as strong a contender as Mysterious Knight. He would probably be like a B for me compared to that one being an A, maybe even a C. But he's run decent speed figure sprinting, and even though he won that debut going just 5.5, he does seem one, based on his last race, that looks like the extra distance would help him quite a bit.
Yeah, if Philip My Dear is indeed as low as 2-1 or somewhere around there, I kind of want to go against him as well as all of the other horses coming out of that Soaring Free. And I agree with you. I think Appraise is the interesting, or one of the interesting alternatives to Mysterious Knight. He's got to handle the stretch out all the way to a mile from 5.5 furlongs, but kind of got the impression watching this horse's first 2 starts that the 5.5 just seems a little bit sharp for him. I think he's going to appreciate some more ground. His dam could go longer when she was racing overseas. So I think this is a good spot for Appraise. We'll see how good he is. He does come in with the best TimeformUS speed figures of anybody, as that debut race that he won at Saratoga came up very fast and I think has been somewhat validated. So I do like Appraise in here, while I respect Mysterious Knight. And the one other horse that I'd want to mention, not really as an A type in an ABC kind of wager, but more maybe a B or a C, is the number 5, Sammy Stone, who is getting on turf for the first time. He's just a maiden, having finished second in his only start, but that race is worth going back to watch. He clipped heels, which is not noted in the chart coming out of the starting gate, and that's why he was so far back in the early going. Made a big run to get up into second in the late stages. Looks like a turf horse, moves like one. It's got a turf pedigree, so he feels like one that could move up on the stretch out in distance and switch to grass.
I agree. He would be my favorite, despite the long odds of the local horses. The horse that ran second in that race has already come back to win with a similar speed figure. The horse that ran third in that race, I should say, behind Sammy Stone, repeated his 90 speed figure and was able to win. So that race looks stronger to me, even though it was a maiden race, than the prep race.
Let's move on to the next race in this sequence, over to the synthetic track. It is the Grade 3 Seaway, being contested at 7 furlongs on the Tapeta surface for the fillies and mares. And Craig, when I looked through this race, I was initially trying to get a little bit creative, but I kind of just kept coming back to the likely favorites who figure to be the number 9, Lady Spitespear, and the number 5, Super Sensational. Is it just a situation where they're too classy for this group?
It is for me. I saw the same thing you did. As a speed figure guy, these two just kind of tower over the field. There's nobody within basically 10 points of them, and that is a pretty large gap. Super Sensational, she's a Grade 2 winner on dirt. She's narrowly missed in a Grade 2 and a Grade 3 on turf, but when you dig back into her form, she's also 2 for 2 on synthetic at this Woodbine course, so the surface shouldn't be an issue with her. And the same for Lady Spitespear. She's another one who's also 2 for 2. She's done most of her running on turf, but her synthetic races, both at Woodbine, have been very good. She's a filly who seems to just thrive in Canada. She's won every start she's ever made at Woodbine. She's lost every time she's ventured out, even though she's run okay. She just seems better there. So For those two, it's me. And if I had to pick one that I wanted to use a little more heavily in here, would probably be the 5 Super Sensational, just because I think she is more of a pure sprinter. We don't really see that from Lady Spear. She has won at the sprint distance on synthetic, but that was kind of just a phony run race without a lot of pace. She was able to sit right off the leader that day, and given her route based background, she was always going to be able to outfinish those horses. I don't think she'll get quite as easy a trip. So if I had to separate them, it would be splitting hairs, but I would make Super Sensational my top pick.
Yeah, we're pretty much on the same page here. I just did not see this as the kind of race where I could get that creative. As like you said, their speed figures just tower over this field. They both faced better runners down in the United States recently. Lady Spear, I was watching the interview with her trainer, Roger Atfield, after the last race, and he was saying that he's not convinced that she isn't better on the synthetics track than she is on the turf. And based on her 2 races on it, I mean, I guess you can't really argue with that. The 7 furlongs doesn't feel like it's any problem for her. She was very impressive, winning that Best Arabian over the same trip and distance earlier last year, I should say. So Lady Spear just seems very logical as the likely favorite. I agree with you, though. I think Super Sensational, you could argue, is equally likely to win this race. She was so impressive winning those first 2 starts on the synthetic as a 2-year-old, and she actually regressed a little bit when they initially switched to different surfaces. She's since improved quite a bit racing on the dirt and the turf, but I think getting back on synth is pretty interesting for her, and she seems to be coming in good form. So yeah, I'm just not overcomplicating this one, Craig. I'm going to use both of these horses in equal strength and just move on to what I hope are some clever opinions later in the sequence. Let's move on to the next race, and it is the feature on this Woodbine Saturday card. Race 9, the Grade 1 Woodbine Mile with a $1 million purse, going the mile distance for the older males on that outer turf course at Woodbine. And Craig, this is a pretty interesting field signed on. Obviously, once again, we have a Charlie Appleby European shipper that looms pretty large here, and that is the 3-year-old Modern Games, who was the winner, though not a winner you could wager on in last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. Appears to be coming in good form, but I don't think this one is a total standout in the race. There are some pretty good U.S. and Canadian-based runners.
I'd agree with that. I think Modern Games does make sense in here. I also think he's going to get wildly overbet because of 2 things. Charlie Appleby, and also the horse he finished second to last time, Baid, who is obviously like the super horse of Europe right now, and maybe even the world. He's undefeated, has won all his races, won at 1.25 miles, I think it was last time. But I think that length and 3/4 margin might be a little deceptive. I think Baid was actually a little more dominant than that. Modern Games got a good time form rating of 122, but that just stacks up to make him a contender, not a standout in this field. So this is a race where I'm going to probably look to beat him because I've went a little chalky in the first 2 legs. I'm not going to totally throw him out of my tickets, but the ones I do use him on, it will be with prices in some of the other legs.
Yeah, I agree with that take. Modern Games is definitely a horse that can win this race, but I agree with your take that he's going to take a lot of money based on that running line behind Baid last time, and Baid was just so much the best that day. I don't want to not give credit where credit is due to Modern Games because he did really take a step forward to chase that horse home. It just felt like the winner was so much the best. But Modern Games' prior form this year, it's okay. I mean, he won that French 2000 Guineas pretty well earlier in the year. Was no match for Vadeni, who is one of the better 3-year-olds in Europe back in the Prix de Jockey Club 3-back. Feels like they found his sweet spot getting back to 1 mile last time, but like you were saying, he's probably going to take a lot of money in this race, and there are just other places that I want to go. I think an interesting horse to talk about in here is the number 2, Ivar, who is just making the second start of the year. I liked his 2022 debut when he won at Horseshoe Indy. Being a decent field that day, some like it Hot Brown did help a little bit on the front end by pressing a fast pace, and that one faded to third. But I thought Ivar was always traveling like a winner, did it well, and this horse has plenty of back races that would make him tough here.
He is definitely one of my strong. He'll be an A for me in this field. I really like that race at Horseshoe Indy last time. I know it was just $100,000 race, but the field in that was a lot stronger than what that would indicate, and it's actually come back a really strong race. He ran a 121 speed figure that day. We've seen some nice performances out of it. I know Duke of Hazard won a race since then. I believe Some Like It Brown has won a couple races since then. So the speed figure has pretty much been validated. Grace Fable, I think, won a race out of that one as well. So it's been a strong race. And what I really like about Ivar is this just seems to me like it is the perfect course for him. He hasn't won a lot of races since he's been in the United States. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the way he runs. And he's run a lot at Keeneland, and he did win a big race there. But he often finds trouble, which I think he'll be able to avoid on this much bigger, sweeping one-turn mile race. So really strong contender for me.
Yeah, one thing I want to add about Ivar is I don't know how closely people have been following the Paulo Lobo barn lately, but I mean, whatever they're doing right now is really working. I mean, he is just winning with everything. I was looking up some stats in Formulator, and the numbers are just insane over the past few months or so. In the past month alone, the barn is 13 for 27, winning it nearly 50% with an ROI that's well over $8. I mean, and this is not a barn that's sending out a bunch of short prices. They're just, everything is running. So I'd be aware of that with Ivar, and I kind of think he's the horse to beat in this race, Craig. I mean, he was third in that Breeders' Cup Mile last year, arguably running one of the best races of anybody that day, and that was a strong edition of the Breeders' Cup Mile, won by Space Blues, who I think would be rated a lot higher than Modern Games in the Charlie Appleby barn. So, yeah, I think Ivar makes a lot of sense here. Craig, I do want to get your take on a horse that's a bigger price on the morning line, who I think merits some discussion, and that's the number 6, Charles Spite. This horse looked so good going the mile in the Maker's Mark Mile at Keeneland earlier in the year when he got the job done that day over Mason in what was a pretty good field. And since then, doesn't it just feel like they've run him in the wrong spots? I mean, they tried the mile and an eighth over that quirky Churchill course. Then for some reason, they tried the dirt 2 back. And last time at Woodbine, his trainer Roger Atfield was saying he didn't handle the heat. That was also a race that didn't feature much pace. Maybe Charles Spite is just finally getting back in a race that suits him.
Maybe, but I wonder if he's tailing off too. That is a possibility. It's one of those where at 12-1, I would probably lean towards your take that maybe he's just been in the wrong spots. But I also don't think he's looked as good lately. And he also hasn't done very well over this Woodbine turf course in the past. He was beaten at 4-5 once in this race. Another time he was 7-2. I think that was a little bit the bettors making a mistake when he lost this race as a 3-year-old. But I do wonder if maybe he just isn't a big fan of this Woodbine course with his best success coming elsewhere.
Another horse in this race that comes in with some gigantic TimeformUS speed figures is the number 8, Get Smokin', and he's the one that's actually shown on the lead in the TimeformUS pace projector. It is a fast-paced situation, Craig, and I think it's kind of dependent on some other horses and how they're ridden as to the chances of Get Smokin' in here, but I don't want to totally discount this guy because he's run well in some one-turn mile races in the past and is capable of posting a big performance on his best day.
He will be on my ticket for sure, particularly if he gets loose. He can be dangerous on the front end. If he gets pressure, yeah, he's probably doomed, but I don't think that's a given, as you say. We have it marked as a fast pace, but he is shown clear, and the horses chasing him and closest on that pace projector are Town Cruise, who is probably the main danger. The other one who was shown back in third, Mighty Heart. I think even though he's had some success on the front end, I don't think he's really has the kind of speed that Get Smokin' does. So for me, it just comes down to Town Cruise and what his rider does and if he challenges him. I suspect he will, particularly from that outside post. I don't think he wants to be floating around on the outside, wind up 3 or 4 wide going into the turn. So if I had to bet on it, I would say it probably is going to get a little hot, but I don't want to totally dismiss Get Smokin', and I will use him on my tickets. The other horse that I will use as well that I'd like to get your take on is shipping in from overseas for, I believe it is Simon Crisford, and that's Finest Sound, a 5-year-old gelding who Actually has time form ratings that stack up quite well with modern games.
Yeah, this horse I initially was taking a look at for that reason because he comes in with the strong Timeform ratings. But something you can do is look at the Timeform foreign comments in the Timeform USPPs, which I always find to be very insightful. And a few of them for his last few races were kind of making the argument that he's coming at us in spots that were a little bit weak for the group level, especially that last race that they just thought that was a weak edition of the Group 2 Celebration Mile. Obviously, just a 5-horse field. When he won 3 back, there were just 2 rivals against him. He's a horse that in those 2 races was the early leader through some slow paces. I don't think he's getting anywhere near the lead in here. So though he comes in with those strong ratings on paper, I wonder if this race really suits him. So the more I looked, kind of the less I liked about him. But if he is a big price, I mean, I guess you could make a case for him because on ratings, he's not that far off Modern Games, who is going to be maybe a fifth or a tenth of the price that he is.
Right. And the one thing that stood out to me about this horse is he runs a lot. This will be his 5th start in almost 2 months to the day since he ran on July 16th. And it's not like his year began on July 16th. He's actually run in Dubai this year, ran second in one of the Group 1s. I don't think it was in maybe no, it wasn't on the big day, but it was a big race there, and he just seems to be a warrior. But he's going to have to be to do all this running, ship overseas, and show up again. And it's not like he one of his races was a while ago; it was only 3 weeks ago. So he is one that I'd be a little worried is going to be a little weary coming in.
Yeah, I was kind of on the same page as you, as thinking there could be some pace in this race. We were looking at Town Cruise the exact same way. I mean, he won this race last year in gate to wire fashion. All of his big performances last year came when they hustled him out to a clear lead. So I don't think he's getting to the front with Get Smoking It here, but I would imagine they're going to at least try to get forward with that horse. So maybe that sets it up for a closer a little bit. That's just another reason why I think that Ivar is especially dangerous. And the way that I'm going to go about this race is I'm going to lean on Ivar and Shirl Spite, the latter because I just think the price is going to be value on him. So those are the 2 that I'm going to really lean on. I'm going to try to downgrade Modern Games a little bit just because I feel like he could be bad value in this race. And then I could use a horse like Get Smokin' as a backup, like a B or a C at the right price. I could even use a horse like the number 3 Wakanaka, the filly in this race, at the right price. She's another one that could benefit from some pace if it develops up front, and she's kept some good company against fillies earlier this year, particularly when she faced Rico Glory and Speak of the Devil in that big performance by her, along with In Italian. So I don't think she's one that's completely impossible in this race either. There are a lot of ways you can go in this Woodbine Mile.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think we were both going fairly short in the first couple. And at some point, you have to be the favorite. So maybe this is the spot to do it.
Let's move on to the final stakes race in this sequence, the 4th out of 5 legs. It is the Grade 1 Natalma for the 2-year-old fillies, going the same distance as the summer, the 1-turn mile. And no Charlie Appleby shipper in this one, Craig. So potentially that makes it a little more confusing because you really do have to sift through a lot of this Woodbine form. A few of these horses are coming out of the Catch a Glimpse Stakes, the local prep for this. The horse that won that race, Cairo Consort, she's drawn the rail here and appears to be coming in good form, but she's one of the few that has to answer the question about some added distance and can they work out the right kind of trip, because when I look through this race, there's not a whole lot of pace signed on, and a lot of the horses that figure to be forward aren't necessarily the more heralded contenders in here.
Yeah, I'd agree. We have it as a fast pace. I think that's a little bit murky. I would say it probably will develop because it usually does in these 2-year-old races, because you usually get a couple that just haven't learned to really rate very well yet. So it usually get at least an honest pace. But it's hard to say which ones they'll be, who it's going to help. So I just tend to look for who I think the best horses are. And I do think you have to start with Cairo Consort. She comes in with the best speed figures. She's been versatile. She won wire to wire last time she came from towards the back of the field, maybe mid-pack to the back. And but she did get a perfect trip that day, just sitting inside, sneaking up the rail, able to win. So she can obviously win, but I want to look in a little bit the different direction in here. And the horse I landed on that really impressed me coming out of that same race, and one that I'm pretty confident wants to get more distance, is Adora, the 5 horse. She's a horse that you probably saw at Saratoga. She showed up for the Schuylerville off a maiden win on the synthetic. Didn't really run at all that day after a tough start. But I really liked what I saw in that turf race. She just kind of was floating in the back of the field wide. Didn't really have any cover. There was a horse in front of her, but it was probably at least 2 lengths before that. She swung out even wider, turning home, and I just really liked how she finished off that race. It's the same race where Cairo Consort was able to sneak through on the inside and just I think the ground loss made all the difference in there. But I just really loved how she was finishing, and she's definitely going to be an A for me in here.
Yeah, I liked Adora's race last time too. My one reservation with Adora is that of those 4 horses coming out of the Catch a Glimpse, I feel like she has the least convincing pedigree to go longer. She's got really more of a sprinter, miler kind of pedigree, so maybe she gets this distance, but some others, it seems like it's a little more obvious that they're bred to go longer. One of those being the number 6 Wickenheiser, who I agree, Wickenheiser was outclosed by Adora last time, but she did have to go a little bit wider than her, just kind of flattened out in the late stages, but she's a full sister to Box and Score and Season Ticket, 2 horses that wanted to go basically as far as they were at races, 1.25 miles at the least. So she's definitely bred to get some added ground. We'll see if she turns out to be that kind of horse. But as I kept kind of going back to watch that Catch a Glimpse and look for the interesting angle out of there, I just was kind of wondering if that was such a strong race overall. As you said, Cairo Consort got such a great ride to win that day. I wonder if she's going to be able to recreate that same magic in this spot. I didn't even think Collecting Flatter ran that bad, who held on for third after being up close to the pace. She's another one that's got some pedigree to stretch out. Her second dam is Memories of Silver, that excellent, Darby Dan pedigree turf horse that was trained by Jimmy Toner back in the mid-90s. But I just wonder about whether I really want those Catch a Glimpse horses, and I wanted to look in a slightly different direction. I think a horse that could take a lot of money in this race is the number 3 G. Laurie, just because she was so visually impressive in that debut when at Colonial Downs, Craig. And a lot of people, I feel like, are just going to overlook the speed figure because she looked so impressive, and even though it came back a slow race, I think people will assume that she just could have run so much faster. I don't know about that. She was facing a really weak field that day, and I wonder if she was just somewhat flattered by the competition.
You almost, it was like you were reading my notes on that horse. She's the one that was very visually impressive, is exactly what I wrote, but her speed figure came back pretty weak at an 80. And when you look through the chart of that race, the 2 and 3 finishers have come back to run again. The second place finisher did not run well at all, finished a distance 6. The third place finisher, moved the dirt, was able to win, but only ran a 72 speed figure in doing so. So she's one I'm just not going to be overly excited about in here. And like you, I suspect she's going to take a lot more money than she probably should.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty interested in a couple of the bigger prices in this spot, and it feels like a pretty wide open race, so I just want to go with those horses and really key on them. And they're actually both maidens. One of those is the number 4 Last Call, who, based purely on TimeformUS speed figures, is right in line with a lot of the contenders in this race. And I know that she's lost both starts, but she's had some mild trips on each occasion, particularly last time when she just got extremely rank wearing those blinkers. I mean, she was off a little bit slowly, rushed up on the back stretch while pulling on her rider, just basically didn't have anything left for the finish after fighting the restraint for about the first 2 to 3 furlongs of the race. But they're taking the blinkers off this time, and even though she was fading at the end that day, she certainly has the pedigree to go longer being by English Channel. She's a full sister to a horse named English Tavern, who was best as a turf router, and I think that she's a lot better than those first 2 starts would indicate. She's going out for a sharp barn, and I think she's going to get somewhat overlooked in here. So I like Last Call quite a bit. If I was making a top pick, she would be it. And the other horse that I think is a little interesting is the number 8, Star Candy, who just has 1 start under her belt, but I thought it was a pretty good one. She earned a solid speed figure for that runner-up finish, and seems like the kind of horse that's not going to mind some added ground for Mark Casse, and she's got a little speed to the outside, and I do think that this pace scenario is somewhat murky, so I kind of wanted to go with those 2 fuzzy runners at better prices and veer away from the short prices.
Yeah, I have no problem with those. As I said, I'm going to use Adora as an A. I have both of those two as sources I would use. This is definitely a race I'm going to spread around a little bit because I don't really like the top two choices, Cairo Consort and G. Laurie, on the morning line at least, and Wickenheimer either. I know you liked Wickenheimer a little bit, but I wasn't quite as impressed. I know maybe the distance would help, as you pointed out, but as 2 year olds, I'm not as big on that. I just couldn't get out of my head that Adora just visibly ran faster than her through the stretch.
Let's move on to the final leg of this sequence, race 11. It is the only non-stakes event in this pick 5. It's an optional claiming 32,000 nominators of one other than the allowance condition, going a mile and a 16th on the inner turf course at Woodbine. So this is a 2-turn event. And Craig, I'm going to start off with a horse who's not favored on the morning line, but I feel like this is one where the public's probably going to bet this race a little bit differently. Isn't the number 8, Speightstown Shirl, supposed to be a clear favorite in this spot?
I was hoping you weren't going to say that because I really like her in this spot. I think the 6-1 morning line is probably a bit of a pipe dream. Her return race just about a month ago, I guess it's been, that just has the look and feel and the distance. Everything about it screams prep to me. Like she wasn't fully meant, even though she went off 3-5. It just seems like she wasn't ready. She didn't get a lot of pace that day, and she's the one that has the back speed figures as a 3-year-old that should be able to win this race. So she's definitely one that I'm going to be using pretty heavily.
I mean, I get it. I mean, when I'm sometimes making a morning line, I'll go through a race and focus a lot of the speed figures when I'm making, my first pass at it. And I get, Lido Key, who's the favorite on the morning line, is coming in with some pretty nice speed figures, especially if we're looking at the buyer numbers. She got a big number for her last race. But Speightstown Shirl, I mean, she's never been a bigger price than 3-1 in any of her races. I mean, she was 3-1 in a grade 3 event. So she always takes money. This is arguably not the toughest spot that she's ever been in. So yeah, it feels like she's going to be closer to 2-1 than 6-1, at least to me. And she makes a lot of sense. She has been a little bit disappointing, I would say, based on the pedigree, because she is the younger full sister to Shirl Speight, who was running in the Woodbine Mile earlier today. But she's run pretty well in her turf races. Like you were saying, that last race going the 6 furlongs did kind of have the feel of a prep. Stretching out is supposed to work for her. So I just think she makes a whole lot of sense in here. And I'm not against her. I just don't want to be under any illusions that I'm getting anything close to that 6-1 price. Craig, is there anybody else you'd want to go to? I mean, Lido Key, who is that morning line favorite, it just seems like she's got a little bit of seconditis. I mean, this horse has plenty of hang in her.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what these buyers figures are you speak of. No, I'm just kidding. But on our figures, she doesn't look all that particularly strong. Clearly, Speightstown Shirl outside that last race is better. And a horse I think you have to give a long look to is the 7 horse, Big Band Louisiane. She is a filly who just looks like she is going to be totally loose on the lead. She's in really good form. She's shown she can win when she does get the lead. The last time she chased kind of a runoff leader, threw a fast pace, took over after about 6 furlongs, and just kept going. Now, obviously, that was a cheaper race. That's a $25,000 claiming race. But I'm sure she's in for the 32 tag here. And as you pointed out, this isn't really the strongest allowance race. And given her tactical edge, she's the one that I want to use with Speightstown Shirl more so than Lido Key.
Yeah, I agree. Lido Key is not really a horse that I want in this race. There would be 4 horses that I consider, and you touched upon one of the other ones. I mean, obviously, Speightstown Shirl is the horse to beat, and she's one that I'll use. I agree with you about that speed, Big Band Louisiane. There's just not a whole lot of front runners in this race. The pace projector shows her on the front end in a situation that's favoring that running style, so I think that's going to make her tough. And she did run poorly 2 back, but if you go back and watch that race, it was just a total pace collapse situation. I mean, the field basically just totally inverted in the stretch. I mean, as the horses that were towards the back just ran right on by those that were in front. So that was just like a textbook pace collapse. I'm not going to hold that against her. She ran a competitive race last time. I also would use the horse that finished behind Big Band Louisiane last time. That's Gabby Squared. She's making her first start off the claim for a different barn. And when you go back and watch that race, I think her rider just kind of got a little bit lost out there. Like you were saying, it was a weird situation where a horse ran off on the front end. The entire field got really strung out, and he was raiding Gabby Squared at the back of the pack in behind some runners that weren't really going anywhere. And I think when he finally got her into the clear, he was like, uh-oh, I have a lot of horse underneath me, and I didn't realize they had gotten this far away from me. And she was actually really running at the end and kind of gave the impression that she finished the race with more left in the tank. Her prior races, they don't quite stack up against these, but I think she's heading in the right direction, and she's one at a big price that I'd want to use. And the other horse that I find a little interesting is the number 6 Guileful, a 3-year-old who is facing some older rivals in here. But, I mean, she's on the upswing. If you just look at her turf races, I know that she's coming off a poor effort behind Lido Key on the synthetic. But, Craig, she feels like one of these horses that might be a little bit better on the turf course at Woodbine than she is on the Tapeta.
Speed figures would certainly seem to point to that. Every time she moves the turf, she gets a big jump in her speed figures. They put her back on synthetic. They go back down. She moved the turf. They go back up. So she is definitely one that I'm using just for that reason. Her speed figure last time on turf in that grade 3 for the 3-year-old fillies, the Ontario Colleen, she ran 100 speed figure, was only beaten 3 lengths. And that 100 stacks up really well with some of the others in here and better than the morning line favorite, Lido Key.
Well, that wraps up the last leg of the sequence. Let's do a brief look back and just kind of summarize how we might construct this ticket. And I think we do have a little bit more leeway in this one, Craig, given the 20-cent minimum at Woodbine. It allows you to spread a little bit more if you want to. But, I mean, obviously, don't just go spreading for spreading's sake. I'm not telling that to you, Craig. I know you know that. But the listeners, I mean, you just go with your opinions and try to play them along those lines. And if you are against a favorite and you think that the race is pretty wide open, you do have those opportunities with the lower minimum to incorporate some prices that maybe you don't love, but that you just think could offer some good value in the sequence. So, Craig, I'll let you go first and just kind of go through it.
Right, and just before I kind of recap, I would say the 20-cent minimum, what it also does that you don't often get at the other tracks is it gives you the ability to vary the amount you bet on your tickets. It's kind of easy to play maybe a 20 cent on one ticket, 40 cent on the second, and maybe 60 cent on the third. So it's something I'm definitely going to have to play around with in Ticketmaker. I don't have a lot of experience playing the 20 cent. I know they do it in pick threes, and I hate it for those bets. But it seems like it's something maybe you could take advantage of in the pick five. So maybe this is a day where I'll try to post some tickets from the Ticketmaker on Twitter for people to see. I would start in the first leg this summer. I'm going to lean on Mysterious Knight. No big shocker there. He's going to take a lot of money. But I'm also going to use Appraise as a backup. I think he is by far the most likely to beat Mysterious Knight if he shows up. In the Seaway, I think it is just strictly a 2-horse race between Super Sensational and Lady Spite Spear. I probably won't try to split them. As I said, if we're forced to make a top pick, I would split hairs and go to Super Sensational, but it's not a big lean one way or the other. In the Woodbine Mile, I'm with you on Ivar. There's just so many things to like about this horse, and I think the one thing I pointed out that was a little different from you, so I'll bring it, is that I just think he's going to love this course. I think it's going to give him room to make his big run. I love you pointed out how hot the trainer is. It's one of the things in TimeformUS I think people maybe don't pay attention to is I don't always open Formulator, but when I see that hot designation for a trainer, I know it usually means something. It doesn't just mean they've been winning races. It involves our ROI too. So I'll go look in Formulator like you did and see the stats. And that barn's just been on fire, as you say. I'm also going to use Finest Sound a little bit. I won't totally dismiss Modern Games, but I'm only going to use him with longer prices than some of the other legs. And I will use Get Smokin' as well. He's one that I don't want to totally dismiss. In the Natalma, a bit more wide open race would definitely be spreading a little more. I'm going to use Adora as an A, but I would also use some of the long shots you mentioned, Last Call, Star Candy, I have no problem with at all. And I'm just not going to use the favorites in this one, G. Laurie and Cairo Consort. I'm going to trust the speed figure on G. Laurie and think that last win was a little bit fake visually. And Cairo Consort, I just hard for me to imagine getting another perfect trip and being able to hold off all of these. And then we just talked about the last allowance race. It's one where I'm not going to use a lot of horse. Well, I'll probably go about 4 deep. I like the long shots that you mentioned. I do think Spadestown Shirl is the horse to beat, but I do like the pace advantage that Big Band Louisiana has as well. So I would use those two both as my A's, and then throw in some of those long shots like a Guileful, Gabby Squared in the lower position.
Yeah, I'd say we've got a lot of spots where we're similar, just a few differences throughout. In the first leg of the sequence, I think the benefit is that you get to see the tote board before you place your wager, and I'd be interested to see how they bet Appraise versus the number 6, Philip My Dear, because I do like both of those runners. I would not like Philip My Dear at 2-1. I would like Appraise at 5-1 if those prices flip-flop, which I think is a possibility. I mean, I don't think they're just going to ignore a Chad Brown runner in this race. And maybe I would tweak those opinions a little bit, because I do think that they're both similar chances to win the race. Obviously, as Craig noted, the number 1 Mysterious Knight is much the horse to beat, but I would want to use some others in tandem with him, so I would just kind of read the board as to whether I'm upgrading Appraise or Philip My Dear. And then that long shot that I'd want to also throw in is the number 5 Sammy Stone on a bit of a lower tier. Craig and I are pretty much on the same page in the 8th race, the Seaway. I'm just going to try to get through with those 2 favorites, the 5 and the 9, Super Sensational, and Lady Spitespear, and not really try to overcomplicate things. In the Woodbine Mile, Craig and I both like Ivar. I also like the number 6, Shirl Spite, at a nice price. I'm going to primarily lean on those 2, try to downgrade Modern Games a little bit, hoping to beat him in this race and just get some better value on some other runners. And I'd also use horses like Get Smokin' as a backup, along with the 4-year-old filly Wakanaka, the number 3. Moving on to the Natalma. I like the long shots in here. The number 4, Last Call, I think is super interesting, and she's the biggest price on the morning line. The number 8, Star Candy, another maiden in this field who I mentioned I also like. And of the horses coming out of the Catch a Glimpse, I'm kind of leaning towards Collecting Flatter as the one that I'm most interested in. I think the added ground is not going to be a problem for her. She's got some good tactical speed. And some of the shorter prices, like Craig was saying, I just wasn't really buying into, so I wanted to do some value shopping in the Natalma. And then we're going to close things out with the 11th race. As I said, there are 4 horses that I want. They are in no particular order. The number 4, Gabby Squared, the number 6, Guileful, the number 7, Big Band Louisiana, and the number 8, Spitestown Shirl. I do think the last of those runners, the number 8, is going to be by far the shortest price of them. So maybe I'll construct my tickets around that, kind of trying to upgrade the horses that are the better value, though I do recognize that Spitestown Shirl figures to be pretty tough in that finale. Well, Craig, that's a look at this entire sequence. Hopefully we gave out some good advice and some opinions that people can use. We will, of course, be back next week to recap some of these races, as well as some of the races from around the country. Craig, I know that we both did some videos on the 2 Belmont at the Big A Stakes races on Saturday, the Jockey Club Derby and Jockey Club Oaks. So those you can check out on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. And I'm sure there'll be plenty else to talk about among some of the 2-year-old races that are likely to take place this weekend all around the country, Craig.
Yeah, I had a blast actually handicapping Woodbine. I love when they have these big days here. I like the big turf races. I like the mix of shippers and local horses. That's just always something that I enjoy as a handicapper, like to try to find value. So I'm really glad we did this sequence and moved away from the BAQ here for at least a week.
Well, everybody, thanks for listening. As always, make sure you remember you can always catch these podcasts on DRF.com, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Wherever you get your podcasts, just make sure to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form channel. Again, thanks for listening, and make sure to catch that TimeformUS Pacecast coming up next Tuesday.